Hey guys, Scott here. I'm here to tell you 3 tips to make your John Muir trail hike more successful. This is actually part 1 of a 3-part series on John Muir trail tips. For those who haven't seen my entire documentary, I was able to go on the John Muir Trail in August of 2020. This is what I've learned from my trip. Number 1, train. That may seem obvious, but actually my next 2 tips will highlight truly how important training is in ways maybe you haven't thought of before. So first off, of course, training is important because we want to be comfortable and enjoy our trip. We're not going to have as good a time if we're constantly out of breath, feeling nauseous, or unnecessarily sore while on the trail. Now, a little bit of soreness is perfectly natural, but we want to minimize the soreness on the trail. But remember, training is supposed to help you, not break you. So stick to a training program that's right for you. Now, a full training program for a long distance hike is a video for a different day, but just real briefly, my training plan, what I did is, number 1, I'm a runner. So I run for the cardio. Not everybody is into running or able to run. It's a high impact sport, but I run, that's how I get my cardio in. I also do calisthenics. I like to focus on a lot of calisthenics that emphasize core work. I think core is so important for any sport, any activity that we're doing. I also do some light weight work, nothing too crazy, just light weights to build up my strength. And of course I hike to train, at least once if not a couple times a week, starting off with just a day pack. As I got closer and closer to my hiking date, I would hike with the full pack, sometimes with about half the weight, and as I got to the last couple of months before my trip, I was hiking with a full weighted pack. Now, mostly just short trips around town. However, I did try to get some altitude work in here in Southern California. You don't think of there being too many high peaks, but I did work in some hikes at San Jacinto, San Gorgonio, and those peaks are about 10,500 and 11,500 respectively. So got a little bit of altitude work in there, and they're challenging hikes as well. Tip number 2 is be prepared for all temperatures. You can wake up in the morning to freezing temperatures, by noon be hiking in blazing sun, and in the afternoon be hiking through a rainstorm, hailstorm, or possibly even snow depending on the time of year. Actually, any time of year you could get some snow at the higher elevations, but it's a little more rare in the summertime. Now, my hike was in August and I experienced all of that except for the snow. I experienced blazing heat, I experienced lots of rain, and I experienced hail. Now, if you're going to be doing any hiking in fall, expect even more unpredictable weather. Probably more storms, more hail, and more possibility of snow. So make sure you bring lightweight clothing for those hot days. I prefer moisture wicking clothing. That way it wicks the sweat away from my body and dries a lot quicker from sweat, or either from getting wet in a creek or anything like that. Number 2, bring layers. So as it gets colder, you can put on layers, or as it gets warmer, you can peel off layers. And then rain gear is a must. I've learned my lesson on the High Sierra Trail a couple years ago. I did have rain gear with me, but I didn't get it on quick enough. I thought it was just gonna sprinkle and then lighten up and no big deal, but next thing I knew, it was hailing and I was drenched and freezing cold, and this was in the middle of summer. So always bring rain gear, bring warm clothing, and then use it when it starts raining. Last of all, be flexible with your itinerary. Definitely make an itinerary, but don't be married to it. Expect it to change. One, you may just find out that you don't really like the campsite that you intended on staying at. You may get there and it's just not that pretty of a campsite and you want to find something better. Or maybe you come across a campsite you just can't pass up. Someplace you didn't plan on staying, but now you want to try this place out because it's such a beautiful spot. And my experience a few times was the weather determined where I was going to camp, where I was going to stop. So a couple times I planned to stay at higher elevations. I realized those areas were very exposed and weather was coming in, hailstorms were coming in, and I didn't want to be up there. There was also lots of lightning while I was on my trip, and I just felt more comfortable down in the trees. So this is how this tip ties into the previous tip of being prepared for weather. And it also ties into the first tip of training. If you get to that camp that you intended on staying at, but you realize it's too exposed and need to move on, after a full day of hiking already and realizing you need to get over another pass so that you don't have to go backwards down to lower elevation, then that means you're going to need to be in shape for those extra miles. So that happened to me a couple of times where I planned on going anywhere between 10 and 15 miles, and then I found out that my intended campsite was a little exposed, and I ended up going 20 to 25 miles. That happened to me a couple of times, and thank goodness I had trained hard for this hike, and it really wasn't a big deal for me. But I highly suggest training, making sure you have the proper clothing for all weather, and be flexible in your campsites, your itinerary. So those are my 3 tips for today. Tune back in next week. I'll have a few more for you. If you got any value out of this video, consider hitting like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.